Denny Dim had been gone from Westmore High for 5 years, but in his mind, he had never really left. When he walked out of the building for what he thought would be the last time, it wasn't on his own terms. He had been forced to resign. Officially, it was called a mutual decision, a way to let him leave with dignity, but everyone knew the truth. His time as principal had ended in chaos, with students walking out in protest, teachers refusing to follow his directives, and board members questioning whether his leadership had ever been a good idea in the first place. His final days were filled with tension, and by the time he stepped down, he had already vowed that it wouldn't be the end. From the moment he left, Dim wanted to come back. He watched from a distance, criticizing every decision made by his replacement, convinced that Westmore was crumbling without him. He told anyone who would listen that he had been robbed of his position, that people had turned against him because they were afraid of real change. He spoke in private meetings and at community gatherings, repeating the same promise. If I ever get that job again, I won't make the same mistakes. Next time, I'll take control. 3 months before the principal position was set to open, Dim found out through a contact at the district office that the school board was beginning discussions about hiring new leadership. It was the moment he had been waiting for. He was ready, and this time, he wasn't coming back alone. One afternoon, while sitting in his friend Leon's penthouse office overlooking the city, Dim leaned back in his chair and shook his head. Westmore is one of the best schools in the city, but it could be so much better, he said. People don't see the inefficiencies. They don't understand how much more we could be doing. Leon smirked, swirling the glass of sparkling water in his hand. He thrived on big ideas and disruption, and he had always seen schools as outdated institutions that failed to keep up with the fast-paced world. You need to stop thinking about what's wrong and start thinking about who can fix it, Leon said. We know successful people all over the city, people with resources, people with influence. What if we bring them in? Imagine what we could do if we connected Westmore to the right people. Dim liked the sound of that. But I don't want to deal with all the red tape, he admitted. If we're going to bring people in, we need them to be the right people, and I want them to have access to what they need to make a difference. Leon nodded. Then let me handle it, he said confidently. I'll put something together. We'll call it United Goals Lifting Youth, UGLY. Dim raised an eyebrow at the name, but Leon laughed. People will remember it, he assured him. And just like that, an ugly initiative was in the works. As Leon developed this operation, Denny Dim had to secure the job as principal. It would be an uphill battle, but he had lots of support. Leon started gathering the city's most powerful business leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs to make sure Dim got hired. They vowed to be partners in helping the school function. This cosign put Dim over the top. They spoke to the public on his behalf, explaining all the great things they would do. In exchange, Dim let them know that he wanted them to be part of the school's planning, and they would have direct access to the school. He detailed the pros. They wouldn't need to be employees. They wouldn't be bound by most school policies. They were something bigger. Leon assured Dim that once the program was in place, it would be so impressive that the board of directors would want it to grow. By the time Dim formally applied for the job, United Goals Lifting Youth was already being introduced to the community. They also emphasized that they would only be willing to help Denny Dim. The other people that were interested in being the principal did not align with their values. That made some people skeptical. Parents were eager to see new opportunities for their children, but there were concerns. Some people questioned how these people could be excited to work with the youth, but only if a particular person was to get the job. It felt like they had a motive. Other parents raised questions of whether United Goals would appear in any official school documents, but the excitement surrounding the program drowned out the complaints, and Dim knew that if he could secure his return, he would have full control of Westmore before anyone had time to stop him. The hiring process moved quickly. Too quickly, some would later say. His past at Westmore was acknowledged but barely discussed. The school board had changed in the last 5 years, and some of the newer members didn't know the full story of how Dim's tenure had ended. He spoke passionately about concepts of a plan. He felt like schools need leadership that wasn't afraid to make difficult decisions. He talked about efficiency, strength, and bold action. And just like that, the board voted him back in. 2 weeks later, Dim sat at the head of a long wooden table in the WESTMORE conference room, watching as his first department head sat for his interview with the board. Coach Buckets Brown. Buckets was a legend in the city, a name that still carried weight in local basketball circles. Once upon a time, he had been the most dominant high school player in the region, with scouts from top colleges watching his every move. But he had never played a single game of college ball. One of the board members, a woman with glasses perched low on her nose, leaned forward. "Mr. O'Reilly, your athletic ability was undeniable, but according to our records, you received multiple scholarship offers and declined all of them. Would you mind explaining why?" Buckets shifted in his chair. "I didn't decline them. I lost them." "How so?" "I made mistakes," he admitted. "I had the talent, but I didn't take my schoolwork seriously. My grades weren't high enough to keep my eligibility. And at the time, I didn't have people guiding me the way I needed. I was young. I thought I could fix it later, but later never came." A different board member, an older man with a skeptical expression, tapped his pen against the table. "So why should we trust you to lead an entire department when you couldn't even stay eligible as a student?" Bucket sat up straighter. "Because I know exactly what these kids are going through," he said. "I know what it's like to have all the talent in the world and still watch your future slip away because you didn't have the right people keeping you on track. I don't want that to happen to them. And I don't need a degree to know how to build a program that keeps kids motivated and focused." Dim, silent until now, finally spoke. "Westmore has had talented athletic directors before, but how many of them have ever actually lived what our student athletes are living? We're not just bringing in people with experience, we're bringing in people who understand." Buckets was hired. The next interview was Mikey the mechanic. One of the board members glanced down at his file, then back up at Mikey, who sat comfortably in his seat, arms crossed, a relaxed grin on his face. "Mr. Izzo, you've never held a position in education. In fact, from what I can see here, you have no experience in finance or accounting. Can you explain why you believe you're qualified to be in charge of the school's budget?" Mikey chuckled. "I've been running my own business since I was 19 years old," he said. "Every dollar that's come through my shop, I've had to manage myself. And let me tell you something. Running a business isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about knowing where money needs to go and where it's being wasted." The woman with the glasses raised an eyebrow. "And you believe that experience translates to handling a multi-million-dollar school budget?" Mikey leaned forward. "I believe that most of the people handling school budgets don't actually know what they're doing," he said. "Schools lose money every year because they're spending it on things they don't need. I know how to make sure that doesn't happen. I know how to stretch a dollar, and I know how to make things run leaner and smarter." Dim nodded in agreement. "We're not here to do things the way they've always been done. We're here to make this school run like a machine." Mikey was hired. One by one, Dim's hires were approved. Miss Starla for science, Tony the Deal, Vincenzo for English, Detective Ronnie for security. Within 2 weeks, his administration was fully in place. Westmore had changed in an instant. The students noticed. The teachers noticed. Some were excited, others were hesitant. But there was no mistaking the energy shift in the school. Principal Dim stood before the faculty at their first official meeting under his leadership, his hands resting on the podium. Before, you had no idea what was really going on here, he told them. Now, we're making real changes, big changes, the best changes. Some teachers nodded, others stayed silent. No matter how they felt about it, Denny Dim was back, and this time he wasn't going anywhere.